Ladies and gentlemen, the PlayStation 5 Pro has had no shortage of attention recently, with a lot of rumours circulating online concerning the performance targets, the release date, some of the specifications, and much more besides. We've been talking about the PS5 Pro on this channel since March when I was first hearing it from my sources, and now I think that it's a very good chance that the console will launch, which leads us to the inevitable question: will and can Microsoft actually respond in kind and release their own upgraded hardware? We've of course had comments from Phil Spencer on the topic, but things can certainly change. We'll get more into that in a moment, but first of all, I want to talk about the Xbox Series X possibly getting a cost-reduced version. I want to give credit to Xbox Era's podcast Nick, as he actually revealed this information. Of course, I'll leave a link to it in the video description. So yes, the Xbox Series X is probably getting a refresh of sorts without the disk drive. Now, the bill of material cost difference with and without the disk drive is probably not much, maybe $30 to $50 US, as it's not like there's a ton of cost associated with, let's say, a Blu-ray drive. Like, seriously, just look at the prices of them online, and obviously they are buying them in huge quantities, so they're not very expensive, and the cost of actually adding them to the system, there's not much to it, essentially. Being very simplified about it, you're looking at like basically a power cable and a SATA port and just the accompanying bits and bobs on the motherboard to support it, so the cost is very little. I am simplifying things here, of course, but yeah, the cost is not going to be that much, so maybe $30 to $50 US. My guess, and I stress this is a guess, I've not heard about the system myself, is that we are probably going to see Microsoft adopt a smaller manufacturing and a refined manufacturing process from TSMC, maybe something like the 5nm process or the 4nm process, and basically they can release a cost-reduced version with a different chassis and all the other stuff. Maybe there would also be like a larger hard drive as standard, an SSD I mean, but who knows. What I can say though is that's my guess. I honestly do not know. I've not heard this rumor myself, and I will ask a couple of sources to see if they've heard anything themselves. But the real focus of this video is allegedly the company are also looking to release other hardware sometime in 2025. Now, of course, other hardware definitely does not state upgraded hardware. And obviously Phil Spencer, to repeat what I said a moment ago, he's basically said that there is no plans for a Pro Xbox Series console. However, that is of course some time ago, and with all the rumours of the PS5 Pro, maybe he's changing his mind. The problem is, APUs do not just get created, consoles, upgraded hardware does not just suddenly get created in 5 minutes flat. It would take Microsoft quite a long time. What I can tell you guys is, back when I was talking about the PS5 Pro initially last year, the early part of last year, my sources had also told me that Microsoft were working on upgraded Xbox Series hardware, and it was basically said to me at the time that it was basically their version of the PS5 Pro, but then of course I was hearing it was cancelled. And another source more recently, again from some of the PS5 Pro information, and they also give me some info on some other stuff, mostly on the PC side, they also told me that Sony of course were working on the PS5 Pro, and Microsoft were considering the upgraded Series system, but it was cancelled quite early into development. Now, assuming that is true, and at the end of the day, I don't know, I'm not on Phil Spencer's shoulder looking at his documents, but my guess is that this is probably happening. Companies look into projects, start projects all of the time, make decisions, and they can cut them at any point. Sometimes it's, they just do some investigation, like, is this actually worth it? Is it going to be profitable? Are we better to wait? What's the technology going to be like? Is this a good thing for developers? One of the reasons that I'd heard that the project was canned, because also, of course, we've talked about Xbox Sabin quite a bit on the channel. Sabin is the code name for the APU. I've spoken about this a lot of times before, so I won't go into it too much here, because I don't want to bore you if you've heard me speak about it previously, but basically, it was upgraded Series S hardware. It was using Zen 4 RDNA 3 to my understanding. It wasn't super powerful. It was a little bit upgraded in terms of the Series S. It had more RAM, but it had a very cool machine learning chip in it, and it was basically going to offer quite close graphics to the Series X. That was the initial plan, but it was scrapped because it was another console that developers would need to support, and Microsoft just didn't really feel as well that the marketing about that console would make any real sense. There's a lot of confusion there. Like, imagine the average person trying to understand that. It's quite difficult. You know, you can easily market that something like a PlayStation 4 Pro or whatever, but something like that, it's a lot harder to market. So I think they basically just said, this is not worth it. Let's just go with like reducing the cost of the Series S and stuff. That's from what I've heard anyway. But yeah, the upgraded hardware, I had heard that there was another APU, or at very least there were early plans, but it didn't seem like they got far into development. From what I understand anyway, AMD had not started to manufacture this stuff or really make any real headway on it. Now, it's very possible that what happened is that the teams at Microsoft had decided, hey, these are roughly the targets we need. These are the, you know, the graphics IPs, the CPU IPs available from AMD at the time. This is going to be the cost associated with that, and they've basically started to do some preliminary work. Maybe they got AMD's teams involved. A very simplified explanation of how this stuff worked, and this is super simplified. This is not 100% technically accurate. I really want to stress, but basically AMD would give Microsoft or Sony a lot of heads up in terms of what they are doing with whatever technology. So for example, you know, the public roadmaps we have, you could see something like, you know, the next generation, maybe 2 generations, you know, something like that. They would be giving them multiple years in advance, and also probably what feature lists or what features they want to incorporate in that. And for someone like Microsoft, someone like Sony, they would probably also incorporate specific features into the hardware, whether that was custom or whether that was part of the feature set at large. And then obviously those teams can then say, well, you know what, we think that we need to probably release our console around this period because all of these technologies, CPUs, GPUs, and so on, they're going to be roughly on par with what we need to deliver much better gaming experiences at a good cost. And that's the key, of course, because you can't, like, you know, if someone was willing to pay, or, you know, console gamers were willing to pay like $1,500 for a console, obviously that would be very different. But they're not. You know, you're looking at like $500 roughly for, you know, a console. So these teams, there's a very good chance, in my personal opinion, that, you know, this had been considered internally. And if they do release the console in 2025, maybe it would give them some time. My personal guess, however, is I am somewhat skeptical. This is upgraded hardware. This is like a pro console. I would love them to release a pro console at that point. I think it would be cool. From what the legal battle between Microsoft and Sony, you know, involving Activision, there were a lot of documents there that basically said that the PlayStation 6 or whatever, it was probably going to release in like 2027, 2028. So let's make the assumption that 2027 is the date. Late 25 for like a series refresh, like upgraded hardware, only basically gives 2 years. It's not terribly out of character. Like, if you look at what, let's say, the Xbox One X, the release date of that, versus the Series X, it's not super out of character. But my feeling is that Microsoft probably will not release it as an upgraded piece of hardware. My feeling is that they're probably just going to go straight into the next generation, and maybe with a clean slate. I think another benefit of that as well is that they could completely change their strategy. From what I'm hearing, I think Microsoft probably will go with a 1 SKU strategy next time, or they won't have such a big gap between the memory configurations of the two systems. Again, I could be wrong on that, but my personal feeling is that's probably what they're going to do based upon people I've spoken to. So I would love a pro console from Microsoft. I think it would be awesome. You know, I think it would be cool and exciting. And obviously, if you're in the Xbox ecosystem, it would, you know, theoretically anyway, be a big upgrade in hardware. However, I think if the PS5 Pro does get released, and at the end of the day, we're only talking about rumours here. Sony have confirmed absolutely nothing. I think they may have the only upgraded piece of hardware. This actually could be possibly beneficial for Microsoft, because they could potentially kick the next generation off a little bit early and somewhat start with a clean slate with a couple of really cool releases for this system. It's going to be very interesting to see how all of this comes out, though. As for the hardware, I mean, it could be something like a new streaming device specifically from Microsoft, like a handheld streaming device. I don't think in 2025 it would be outside of the realms of possibility to have an Xbox Series S handheld type of system. If you were to look at the performance of the Xbox Series S in terms of like GPU and CPU performance, and then you were to look at what we're expecting from Strix Point, which is going to launch in 2024, basically, you know, all those parts are going to be available. I think like a year later, we could probably have a handheld console, which is not that far away from a Series S, and it would also mean that Microsoft would of course be able to then really leverage the fact that they have that cheaper system available. It's going to be very interesting. Honestly, I have not heard about the hardware launching in 2025, so I am just spitballing. I'll try to reach out to some sources and try and figure out more information. But at the end of the day, console hardware, you know, I think it's pretty cool. I'm more of a PC gamer, as most people watch the channel know. However, you know, at the end of the day, I do love console releases, and I think they're always really exciting. So upgraded hardware would be really cool from Sony and Microsoft. I would be very interested to see what Sony are doing with the PS5 Pro. I think it's going to be a very cool console if the rumours, including from myself, are true, and they do actually end up releasing it. And if it is upgraded hardware, if it is a pro console from Microsoft, if it does launch in 2025, in theory, it should be able to outperform the PS5 Pro. In theory, assuming they're going for like a similar-ish price point, simply by the fact that it is a later hardware release, so you would expect it to be, you know, more powerful. It's going to be extremely interesting to see how all of this plays out. With that said, guys, take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.